Welcome to Life Unrestricted.
This is your show if you're sick of living a life controlled by food and exercise rules, and if you're ready to learn how to accept yourself and enjoy the heck out of life. My gig is about body image, femininity, self-worth, and resilience. Come on, let's walk side by side as we slowly step out of restriction misery and unlock our true selves.
Your host, Merritt Boxler, is a former national radio DJ, freelance journalist, speaker, and writer with a passion to make women feel good in their bodies. This is a show brought to you live from Switzerland.
Hey there, lovely radicals. I hope you had a good week. And I also hope you're still sitting firmly in the saddle of self-kindness, of saying no to overexercise and to some new crazy January ideas as to how to restrict food. Living in diet culture madness is hard. I mean, it's hard at any given time of the year, but in January, they really crank the shit up with all this exaggerated weight loss worship all around us. I'm lucky I cleaned out my social media feed so thoroughly that I rarely see anything diet crazy in it, but, life, that happens. Not so much content curating there, right? Say at work or at events, gatherings, etc. And well, I had an experience that was so beyond anything I would have expected that I just have to tell you about it. I mean, it's really quite something. So I met a few new people in the past months because I started going to meetup events, stuff like Sunday coffees and such. As expected, I met a few exceedingly odd and or boring people, but I also met some really nice specimen of humanity. With two of them, I've almost instantly hit it off, a woman and a guy, just about my age. And even though we all didn't know each other 4 months ago, we now meet pretty regularly for coffee or a day trip somewhere. And these two have really been an enrichment to my life, and apparently they feel the same about me. No romantic interests on any front, just, exciting discussions, shared laughter, and mutual interest. So I think it was about a month ago, I told them about my difficult history with eating, not eating, overeating, and this rather compulsive relationship to exercise. Because, they started asking me about my podcast, and they were really interested in our message here, since they too, of course, are in one way or another affected by the constant body negativity in this society. And interestingly, they both never really dieted. They love eating, and they are much more at ease, generally more relaxed and laid back than me. Good people to learn from when trying to stop certain fear-based mindsets and behaviors. I was certainly happy that they weren't Fitbit wearers and Weight Watchers members, you know what I mean? So anyway, a few days ago, the guy in our merry little trio invited us over for dinner, which I found really sweet. She and I had never been at his house, so that was really, I took it as a sign of growing trust and a level of feeling comfortable around each other. So we went there, brought some food with us, veggies and salad and soup and dessert, and we made a pizza together. They drank beer and wine, which I'm not a big fan of, and dinner was great. We had a lot of fun. These two are really not people who eat only half of everything and then loudly claim how stuffed they are. They were just really cool people to be around, and I loved it. But then after dinner, he and she started talking about blood pressure and subsequently about weight. And so then I realized that my little spiel about health at every size and explaining the latest science to them couldn't have stuck. So I kind of zoned out. And then, guys, he said, "Why don't we weigh ourselves? I bet I gain weight over the holidays." He really said that. So horrified, I said, "No, thanks, I never weigh myself. And why should you?" But she seemed to be totally on board, and they didn't seem to hear me as I said, "What? You're really gonna weigh yourself? Now?" after dinner? But off they went and they brought out his bathroom scale. I am not kidding. I stood up and I fled the room, went into the kitchen trying to block out their weighing business. They were laughing and everything, so on the surface, I mean, it seemed to be quote unquote no big deal. But then as they sat back down and I was about to join them again, I heard them launch this weight lossy dialogue, him going, yeah, it wouldn't hurt to lose a few pounds. I know. And her going, man, me too. I mean, I guess I just love food too much. I guess I should watch it a little bit. Honestly, guys, you know me. I'm not easily at a loss of words, but I was dumbstruck as I was standing half in, half out of the kitchen. I was kind of frozen. I had zero idea as to what to do, how to protect myself from this triggering stuff. And at one point they realized that I had been gone for a while and they called, hey, Merritt, what are you doing? We miss you here. And I sort of peeked around the corner into the living room and said, hey, I don't want to sound overly dramatic, but unless you two change the subject, I'm probably not going to stay any longer because this whole weight thing is extremely triggering for me and I don't feel comfortable right now at all. Do you think we could change the subject? And they did. And we spent the rest of the evening talking about all sorts of stuff and it was good. But honestly, this occurrence really outdid anything I've personally witnessed in that regard. And I still kind of can't believe that they did that, especially knowing about my recovery process, but also in general. I mean, who does that? And who does that on a first dinner date with people that you've only just getting friends with? I mean, if it weren't tragic, it'd be hilarious. What? And don't get me wrong, I really, really like those two. And because I do, I guess I will have to face a pretty uncool conversation soon because it's really weighing on me. Pun only half intended here. I think this conversation is unavoidable in order for me to feel okay and willing to invest in our friendship in the future. You know what I mean? And I don't know why I told you all this, really. I guess it just shows that this was really hard on me and completely unexpected. All in all, the result of this, let's call it spectacle, I'm not so much angry at them, but I'm really mad at diet culture. See how bad it fucks with people's minds? I mean, those two usually are admirably relaxed around weight and food. So it's really sad to see that even they obviously still believe that their bodies are not quite right and something ought to be fixed. I mean, this is just one more example to show us that we really have to stand together and to keep chiseling away at the throne this whole weight loss industry sits upon. So let's do that. In today's episode of the Life Unrestricted podcast, I get to talk to Melissa Toler from Maryland, close to Washington, D.C. She's a certified health and wellness coach, speaker, and writer with a background as a pharmacist who offers non-diet, weight-neutral health approach. And her goal is to help women connect the dots between our culture's ridiculous beauty standards and our personal struggle with self-acceptance. She helps women unlearn the toxic messages and behaviors from lifelong dieting so that they can learn a new set of skills and have a life free from obsession and self-loathing. Having a 25-year history with dieting herself, she knows personally what it means to be stuck in the diet binge cycle. She came to Sanity a few years ago and she says it was one of the best decisions she has ever made. Melissa also teaches workshops and courses to help people on the path to improving their body image. We chatted quite a while before I started recording, and the first official question I asked her was if she can remember a time where she ever felt good in her body before she internalized our culture's obsession with thinness.
You know, when I look back, I remember just feeling neutral about my body. right? It's all before puberty and middle school that I just felt neutral. It wasn't something that I thought about. I was just having fun. I was enjoying food, playing with friends on the playground. I just remember not even thinking about it, which is, it's kind of absurd to even like imagine that now, right? Because we're taught to be so aware of how our bodies look and how they're not supposed to look or how they're supposed to look. It's like body neutrality is probably a weird concept for a lot of people.
I find it a lot more appealing than the fluffy pink body love concept, because it's weird to suggest to somebody who has hated their body, their belly, their thighs, their butt for their entire life and try to shape it to suddenly go, yeah, my thighs are adorable.
Yeah.
My subconscious goes, right. So I think body neutrality is really the way to go. And I had Summer Innanen on the show also, and she said it's really the goal is to not think about your body anymore. And that's exactly what happened to you when you were a kid. Probably with all of us. It's just the vessel we were walking around in and hugging people with and having temper tantrums with, whatever. But it was just the vessel, and we didn't give it so much thought. So I'm fully on your side with that.
Yeah, it was, I guess, when I look back at it, it seems like a really great feeling to because I was just being, right? That's how kids are. They just be.
It's a certain amount of freedom in that.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, God, yes. Freedom is absolutely the word.
So I'm great that you're down to earth with this stuff and not fully into the fluffy pink stuff that most of us just fail at succeeding at, because it seems not possible to go from ice cold to warm in one step. So
you'll find out that I'm not a fluffy. I hate fluff, and I just like to have more realistic stuff. And I agree with you. I don't think you can go from hating your thighs so intensely on Monday and then by Friday you're just like in love with them. That may have happened for some people, but for the overwhelming majority of women who live in the culture that we live in, it just doesn't work like that. And I think it is a disservice to women to suggest anything otherwise.
That's why I find it important to bring it up, because it's really something that we can trip over on this journey, and that gets us right back into the old mentality, because the inner gremlin goes, see, it didn't work. I told you were terrible. Go back to your dieting. So but back to your story. I'm sorry. So how did this whole body loathing, dieting stuff start? Do you remember when this whole thing started?
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember the exact moment that I thought I was fat and needed to do something about it. So I think I was like 11, and I got on the scale for whatever reason. I don't know what prompted me to do that. Actually, it would be interesting if I could remember. But I remember getting on the scale in my parents' bathroom at home and looking down at the number and thinking that it was too high. But I don't know who told me that it was too high. And then from that point on, I felt like there was something I always had to do to fix that. And I think it also coincided with puberty and going to middle school. So in 7th and 8th grade, I started a new school. I didn't know anyone in my class, and the students who were there, they had all known each other from like 1st grade because they had all gone to the same school. And so, as the new kid, you're subjected to a fair amount of teasing and stuff. And part of the teasing was about me being chubby. So it was like this perfect storm of events that happened. And that's when it just all kicked in from that point on.
Did you have dieting parents, or did you grow up in a weight-obsessed household, sort of?
My parents weren't overtly critical of our bodies. I didn't think my mother was overtly critical of her body. However, she did spend a lot of time, like many women, dieting, right? It was like Monday morning came and it was some new diet. She would go back and forth to Weight Watchers. So I think I just kind of learned from her that this is just what you did as a woman. And then, combine that with my obsession with 17 magazine and how everybody was just thin throughout the whole magazine. That was the message that I got from all angles, plus the teasing at school.
That's something we never forget, right? I had this discussion in my Facebook group recently with somebody who said that she, in this process, started remembering all the bullying, and she now understands why she was so obsessed, because she was so afraid. It was so traumatic that she didn't want this to happen again. That's what kept her in the cycle. These earliest memories stick with us like Velcro for the rest of our lives, and it's so hard to let go of that, believe that it's a safety mechanism to diet.
Yes.
So you started dieting pretty early.
I started to be concerned about weight and doing something about it. And I think the way I tried to control my weight primarily was through exercise. Because I did like exercise. I think that's primarily how I did it. But I would also restrict and cut back on food and maybe skip breakfast. And it was always something. It was always something different over the years. But it felt like I was on a constant cycle of trying to lose weight, losing weight, being happy with that, struggling with maintaining it, and then just saying, fuck it, and then going back to eating. And then, that whole cycle. That was my whole life.
Right. For me too, totally. I didn't even question it because I was so soaked in this diet culture stuff. Like a fish in an aquarium, like the water around me was just diet culture. And that was what I was used to. And I was not letting on how much I was suffering. Everybody was complimenting me. Everybody was saying how fit I am, how good my body looks for my age, or what the hell ever. And I had no inner foundation. So I was kind of dependent on this outside approval.
Yes, absolutely.
And that kept me stuck, and I wanted to look effortlessly thin, and so I just thought, well, I have to keep doing this. Everybody else seems effortlessly skinny, so I probably just have a wrong body and have to be more strict, which sucks, but I just have to do it. So I remember reading on your website that you dieted for 25 years, which I can so much relate to. Did it get harder over the years?
Yes, because... Yes, it got harder because there was always something new or different to try, right? If it's not South Beach, it was Atkins, or going back to Weight Watchers, or grapefruit diet, or all these insane things. And the reason it got harder for me was just not knowing what I should be doing, right? It was just like, what am I really supposed to be eating? How much am I supposed to be exercising? And I was just overwhelming myself with information from magazines and books and just everywhere. It just became mentally and emotionally overwhelming and exhausting for me.
I found weight maintenance became harder as well. So I had to crank up my exercise time extremely to the point of total exhaustion and having to exercise over injuries and losing bone mass and my period and everything. And I got more and more desperate because I was like a caged animal looking for a way out. I'm like, hell, what else am I supposed to do? I can't keep this up. I'm going to face ridicule, and I'm going to face total humiliation in front of everybody if I can't keep this up. So for a lot of people, it turns into a full-time job, which totally disconnects us from our outside world, our work, mostly our relationships to the world.
I like what you said about it felt like a full-time, it feels like a job, and it disconnects you from everything. And that's how I felt. As I got older, I was just like, this can't possibly be it. Like, this can't be
Yeah.
the thing that I'm supposed to be spending my time and energy on.
Like until I'm 90? For
Yeah, like,
fuck's sake.
when does this come to an end?
Yeah.
And I think that was like the start of me thinking differently. There's so much that I want to do with my life and time. And this dieting and trying to suppress my weight is taking up so much of my life and time. Like, there has to be something more. And it turns out, yes, I was right. There's a lot more. There's a lot more. But when you're so caught up in that cycle, it can be just almost impossible to see that.
Totally. What prompted your change of thinking about stuff?
I think it just was, I had that thought, like, this can't be it. And then I started to just explore different things. And the great thing of the internet is you can have all this information at your fingertips. So let me back up. For 4 years, I did fitness competitions. So I started in 2011 doing fitness competitions. And of course, my primary reason for doing it was I thought it would be a good, quick way for me to lose weight. Because, fitness competitions are like a super concentrated, exaggerated version of diet culture, right? Because you're supposed to do all this work to get to this physique that is completely incompatible with real life.
And inherently hating of women somehow. It's objectifying, it's sexualizing.
Yeah.
It is inherently disrespectful of women, I think, but they're in it themselves, so they kind of contribute to their own oppression, if you will.
Well, because it's so much a part of our culture, and you're celebrated too. People were telling me, "Oh, you're so inspiring, and you're so great, and you're so this." And one of the biggest takeaways I've had from that is, even though I had 6-pack abs and was lean and doing all this stuff, it didn't make my life better, which is, the ultimate promise of thinness, right? That's the ultimate promise. You get to the promised land of thinness, and then you're like this awesome person, and all your problems will be solved, and everyone will love you. And that just isn't how it works. And so that played a role in shifting my thoughts around weight loss. And I felt like, weight loss gets sold to us as a requirement for being a woman, right? It's like you have to be doing it. No matter how thin you might already be, you always have to be watching your weight. And I hated like that aspect. It just felt so manipulative. It's very insidious. And, I just started to explore other ways of being. Like, it just can't be it. So I followed some people. I stumbled upon Summer Innanen a couple years ago. And just, you know how you get on the internet and you just sort of like explore, and you end up in all types of places. So, I've gotten to connect with or follow a lot of other body positive, non-diet, weight neutral bloggers and writers and coaches. And, I ultimately stumbled on Health at Every Size and Linda Bacon, intuitive eating. And, this for me, even though I'm a non-diet, weight neutral wellness coach, I'm still learning. I'm still exploring. My views are still shifting around this whole thing. So right now I feel like I'm immersed in non-dietness, which is awesome.
Yeah. Could you take those messages in right away? I'm asking because I remember 2 years ago when I was totally suffering and totally taken aback by the fact of how sick and unhealthy and unhappy I was, even though I thought, as you said, that I would probably reach the promised land finally. But no, not at all. Quite the contrary happened. So I read Intuitive Eating for the first time, and I really couldn't compute the message. I found all that the book said totally logical, and yet at the same time, I found it impossible to break free from my obsession with weight and the whole exercise thing, the whole body loathing, if you will. I heard about the importance of giving ourselves full permission to eat, to heal this relationship with food. And as sweet as that sounded, there was no way I could do this because I knew that my binge tiger was ready to burst out. And I felt like I had no control over it. In order to stay skinny, I had to, be in control of it. So now looking back, I see why so many of these books are being resisted by so many people. In real life, it's probably because we don't yet have the connection to any other voice than the loud one of our Gremlin board members screaming at us all day. And really, it was quite something to open up to the idea of self-compassion, because I still only heard my inner Gremlin, and he, of course, howled at the ridiculousness of these ideas. So I was not in a position to really move because there was no space between my thoughts. It was just the Gremlin. So I couldn't compute what I read, even though it made sense. Did you experience that too, or did you already have a basic foundation of self-acceptance?
So that's a great question. I think it's an important one for anyone who is looking to free themselves from diet mentality. It takes a while to even absorb the message and absorb the possibility that you can exist without trying to always control your weight, let alone doing the work it takes to get there. So to answer your question, it initially, I was like sort of on board, and then I was like, well, so I wasn't, it took a while for me to fully digest the message and for it to make sense to me. And I had lunch with a friend a couple of weeks ago, and she's been following my work for a while. And she said, I love what you're saying. She said, and I'm with you for like 93%. But don't you think that people still need to lose weight? And you don't know how much I get that. So much. And it's because we have like decades of diet culture thinking in us. So reversing that does not happen overnight. It takes a lot of time and a lot of patience and a lot of self-compassion, and surrounding yourself with messages to encourage you. I mean, it's huge to have a support system to like sort of drown out the diet culture messages that are everywhere. You need to ramp up the non-diet messages.
It's really angering for me to see that whenever you slap weight loss on whatever kind of product you want to sell, then people will, buy it in droves. And if you say non-diet, people go, oh, as if they were not ready to even think the thought that having a body at its whatever size is okay, and are not open to let their own liberation happen in some way. And I think it's because, as you said, there are a lot of coaches also out there who made it their goal to, make the big bucks out of this by saying, love yourself, and then you'll be naturally skinny. You'll lose the weight automatically. Or people saying, yeah, it's okay to be a bit chubby, but, you mustn't get too fat. So there's always a limit to which people are ready to listen to health at every size messages, because it's inherently threatening all that you have invested in your own weight suppression all the years.
It is a threat. It's a threat not only to you, the individual, and what you have believed and bought into, both emotionally and financially, for such a long time, but it's also a threat to the larger culture. There's a lot of money that is made and to be made off of women and their insecurities and selling a solution to that. So the diet and weight loss industry is about $60 billion annually. People don't want to give that money up, which is why you'll see so many coaches and gurus and experts taking it just halfway, right? Like, oh, well, if you stop dieting, then your weight will naturally fall into this like magical place. But the premise is still weight loss, though. Do you know what it's the idea is still, if you give up dieting and restricting, then you'll naturally lose weight. It's all so wrapped up that it's hard to, as we were talking about before, it's hard to just step out of that. And when people are selling weight loss, they have a vested interest in it. And it's hard to let that money go. It just is.
Totally.
Which, I totally understand, because I've made a lot more money selling weight loss than not.
Yeah. I think a critical step is really awakening. That's what Summer Innanen did for me. Awakening the inner rebel. And she did it, and Virgie Tovar did it, and so many others did it by just educating me about the numbers and the facts and the messages and the insidiousness of diet industry and the fitness industry and the beauty industry, and tying it into intersectional feminism and social justice issues. And then it became so clear that somehow this part of me awoke that said, fuck no. I'm not participating in that anymore. And it made me see, and for a while I just observed my surroundings and what I saw, and kind of looking behind the curtain of what the ad told me and what this movie was trying to sell me, or what this headline was really proposing, and just asking, what is the ultimate goal? And ultimately it was always money or women's suppression.
Yes.
And we were just raised with it so automatically that we kind of approve of all this. We just, if we participate in all of this, it's basically our yes. Every dollar we spend buying magazines like that, and into buying diet products, and in, all the things we do, then it's really us saying yes. And my inner rebel said, no, thanks, I'm done with that. So I think it's important to kind of educate people and make them aware of what is being presented to them and teach them critical thinking. We all need to be taught this, because it's nowhere in our education programs, and we're all asleep, and we need somebody to wake us up to some facts.
Yes.
How do you do that with your clients?
So I think it is, it's media literacy. It's also resilience, right? Because, these messages come from the media, but they're also reinforced by people around us, like our coworkers who are doing a weight loss challenge at work. It comes from our parents who are, cautioning us to not eat so much at Thanksgiving because we don't want to put on weight over the holidays. It's come from hanging out with your girlfriends who at lunch just want to talk about how much they are not going to eat next week because they had brownies this week. It's
everywhere. Yeah.
It's every freaking where. So I love teaching people how to pick apart the messages, how to see the underlying manipulation behind it, because once you can deconstruct the message, it starts to lose its power over you. Once you know what the purpose is, it's for you to part with your money, it's for you to be so distracted from your own life that you can't do anything else. Once you see that, and you can see that theme consistently at various angles, even in ads that purport to be body positive and empowering, their ultimate goal is to sell you something. Their ultimate goal is for you to get parted with your hard-earned cash. And
make some examples, please, so that people have a practical takeaway from our conversation.
Sure. So a couple of companies that come to mind, I don't even know if these ads are still running, but so Special K, I think their tagline, what will you gain when you lose? So, it's basically telling you to focus on your life will get better. And their ads come across as very empowering, it's really false empowerment. Weight Watchers also, with their recent rebrand with Oprah, and it's all about living your life. But the premise of the program is the same as it always has been. You come every week and you get on a scale, and your success is determined by pounds, and your life is dominated by points. It's all BS. it's designed for you to come back over and over again, keep shelling out your money.
I think it's crucial to be suspicious of those terms that have been co-opted by diet culture, like the body positivity in ads is usually to be looked at with a critical eye, as well as women's empowerment and be an empowered woman. And then we go, oh yeah, I want to be an empowered woman. But we go on oppressing ourselves.
Yeah. And I think we're so hungry for true empowerment that we, at first glance, we eat this stuff up. It's like they put these little 1 minute, 1.5 minute videos on social media, and everybody shares it, and it's like, oh my God, this is making me feel so great. And they're still selling the same shit they were selling before. It's just another entree into your mind and into your wallet. That's ultimately what it comes down to. So I'm hypercritical of a lot of stuff. I don't believe most of the stuff that I see that claims to want to empower me. Because what real empowerment is? Real empowerment is that I, as an individual, have autonomy to make decisions about how I want to eat, what I want to eat, how I want to move my body, whether or not I want to be whatever size I want to be, how I define health and beauty for myself. That is empowerment. That is what is challenging the status quo. That's what that means. That's what undermining diet culture means. Doing whatever the fuck you want to do based on your own standards and not trying to meet up to an arbitrary standard.
And in order to do that, we need to be able to recognize our inner gremlin voice, because he is, let's say, the repetitor of the diet culture messages. Because for us women, it's mostly, our gremlin is mostly about body image related stuff and body stuff. And once we cure that, it is still there. The inner gremlin might attack your work or whatever, but for most of us, it starts and gets stuck around body image. So how do you help your clients establishing a real connection to themselves or reconnecting them?
Yeah. Well, I think first it is important to acknowledge or to become aware that there is a disconnection, right? Because diet culture requires that you become disconnected from your body and your life in order to keep participating. So helping people see that disconnection in their own lives, taking them through a series of questions to help see, I'm not involved in my life. I'm disconnected from my body. I'm not sure how I feel physically. I don't know what I want to eat. So number one, becoming aware that disconnection exists and how it shows up currently in their lives. And then number two, I think self-compassion is the foundation for this work, right? Because like you said, that inner gremlin voice is there. It's always in the back of your mind. And learning how to hear the voice and not obey it. Learning how to hear the voice and know how to be compassionate towards yourself is so critical for this whole process. And putting that into practice. Self-compassion isn't a one and done thing. It's a daily practice, and one that many of us are we just don't know how to do.
Yeah, and I want to pause for a second because I really think this is important. I just want to share my first experience with self-compassion. When I read about it, it was all nice, but I had no idea how to really implement it. And I want to break this down into a little detail because I wasn't just not ready to be self-compassionate. It was something very much deeper. I was not trusting because my inner gremlin was still so loud that it just kept saying, yeah, sure, that's just another word of letting yourself go, right? Just let yourself off the hook for anything. Yeah, why don't you just go out and steal stuff and then be self-compassionate to yourself? Yeah, why don't you eat all day and never exercise again? Sure, go ahead and be nice to yourself. It's like, it's so hard to step back from these ideas that I need to be controlled and I need to be disciplined and I need to, like I was raised, like we need to work for stuff and stuff has to be earned and this is not a fun ride and there's no such thing as a free lunch and blah, blah, blah. And then learning about self-compassion was really hard to implement because it felt like a ludicrous idea, like this voice inside of me going, hey, it's okay if you want to rest. You're an exercise addict and it's probably better if you rest. And I couldn't do it at first because I was like, yeah, but that's going to lead to disaster. And I probably can't trust this nice voice because nice voices are nice, but it means disaster. So I was really reluctant to listen to this voice. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. So how do you bridge the gap between total fear into a little more love and trusting the process?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I think is really important is this, like a lot of these concepts that you and I are talking about, intellectually, they make sense, right? We intellectually know that negative self-talk hasn't worked for most of us. When you try to beat yourself into submission, it may seem like it's working initially, but ultimately over the long term, it has no staying power. So intellectually, a lot of these things we know. It's emotionally getting to the place where we can start to trust ourselves with them, and that takes practice. So I think it's really important to practice these things over time, having support in the form of just a supportive community, and if you can afford it, a coach or a therapist, because this is long-term deep work, and everyone's situation is a little different, right? We all have different histories and past that have been shaped by diet culture and other things. That has to be incorporated as well. So learning self-compassion and learning how to use it on a regular basis takes so much practice and patience with yourself.
How does it look like when you do
it? For me, it looked like initially, like you said, not trusting that it's possible because I got to keep pushing. And here in the United States, our culture is based on pushing and striving and accomplishing and, no excuses, which leaves little room for self-compassion, right? And self-compassion is often mistaken with letting yourself go, as you said. So for me, it looked like initially just not trusting the thing, not trusting it at all. And then realizing, okay, I need to be a little bit nicer to myself. So how do I do that? And there are a lot of resources. Dr. Kristen Neff is someone who's done a lot of work in self-compassion, and she has a lot of free resources on her website. So you can Google her and get those resources. And practicing. It's still it's not that easy still for me, Merritt. I mean, it's way easier than it has been in the past, but recognizing my humanity and recognizing that some days are hard and recognizing that I am a human being deserving of compassion and kindness and care and recognizing that I'm having a difficult time. And sometimes I just sit with myself and say, listen, you're having a difficult time right now. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to not get this done. It's okay that you didn't get to the gym. And it gets better the more I practice.
And for those of us who have had traumatic childhoods maybe, or have never been reassured by parents or never been acknowledged by parents, it seems like a real stretch to say, yeah, it's okay. And it's okay if you're struggling because you're not supposed to struggle. You're supposed to be quiet and low maintenance and productive and prettier and whatever.
Yeah.
So that's pretty hard to learn.
It is hard to learn. And one of the things I constantly reinforce and reiterate to people I'm speaking to or coaching is this process is not easy. Like it just isn't. And I like to be very real with people. But the possibility of the freedom on the other side is it's an amazing feeling. But there's work involved.
Yeah, and that's probably why people are so avoiding of the thing. I mean, I don't believe in food addiction as much as I believe in diet addiction because it's so much easier to just keep focusing on that and blame everything on the diet not working or yourself having screwed up or fallen off the wagon or whatever, than actually trying to love yourself, because you'll be head on with your inner demons and you have to work through that. And that's a lot harder. I think us doing what we do shows that we are quite badass, because just being obediently dieting and stuck in all that, turns out that was easier, but I was a lot unhealthier and a lot unhappier. But it was easier to do because I did what everybody did.
Yeah. It was easy because you follow rules, right? It's the thing to do versus, like you said, sitting with yourself and confronting parts of yourself that you don't want to, that are unpleasant. That's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. I found it very valuable to have someone who taught me how to bring space between my thoughts and make some room between my thoughts. And I'm not a proponent of positive thinking at all. I'm more a proponent of kind of open thinking, which for me means being able to at least put a question mark behind what I hear constantly in my head. So I don't go fighting my inner gremlin, but I say, is that true, what you're saying? I hear you, but I don't know if what you say has worked so well for me over the years, so I dare to raise the question, is it true? And I had a teacher show me this. You probably know Byron Katie. She's a transformational leader, or whatever you want to call her, and she taught me to sit and just ask. I want to make an example so that everybody can have a takeaway. Like, I could make a statement like, I'm angry at myself for eating because I will be fat. And then she asks, is it true? I said, yes, sure. And then she goes into silence mode for about 30 seconds. And then she looks you in the eye and says, can you absolutely know that this is true? And then you kind of pause, because you think about, if I had to play God, would I still be so sure? Is this really true? And what am I really saying here? What am I believing? And then you kind of soften around it, and you're able to put a question mark behind your own thinking. And then she asks you, how do you feel when you believe that thought? And when you really are present, you feel how shitty it makes you feel to believe that thought, because you feel haunted, you feel hunted, you feel chased, you feel caught, you feel caged, you feel small, you feel terrified, you feel like a victim, you feel hopeless, you feel alone, isolated, and a failure. And that hurts. I can't remember how many times I cried there. And then she asks, when those feelings have been acknowledged and they had the permission to be expressed, and she asks, well, who would you be without that thought? And then you experience this sudden openness. It gets light somehow, and you feel like playful almost, like, And you start to realize your true nature is somehow much less attached to all that, and much more present, and much more open to stuff, and much more wanting connection to another person. And by being present, you can connect to other people. And I realized, if I'm stuck with this old thinking, I'm disconnecting from all my meaningful relationships, not really able to contribute much at work because I'm afraid to go have lunch with the people. I'm somehow worried that I'm not looking good enough to be on TV. That's why I stayed in radio, to be honest. And I turned down the job offers I had to be a TV speaker, because I was like, I was so afraid to get hate mail, and that the tabloids would print nasty comments about me, as they do about my coworkers. And so I didn't. And I realized how much it kept me small, and it kept me from actually doing what I wanted. So that opened some space. And now I'm at least able to take these sheets that I still have from Byron Katie and go, okay, what am I thinking here? And then I ask myself, is it true? Can I absolutely know that this is true? How do I feel when I believe the thought? Who do I think I am when I don't believe the thought? if I didn't have the thought? And then I'm able to turn it around and play with it and come up with a different thought. And that gives me so much more wiggle room. And that set off a whole journey of slowly stepping into this journey. So I just wanted to share that with everybody, so maybe it helps someone to ask some questions, because as you said, it is important to ask ourselves good questions.
Yes.
And ask questions about the world out there. And it's not enough to just question our own selves and saying we're not enough and how could I fix this, but instead ask the really valuable questions.
Yeah, I love that. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because being curious instead of judgmental has helped me tremendously. Those questions that you said from Byron Katie, just like, I wonder what that thought means. Why is that here? What is it that I really need? And I'll give my own personal example. And I always tell people, even though I talk about this, I do this work, I feel like I'm immersed in it, my inner gremlin still speaks up. And most of the time, I can work with it. And I hear the voice and I'm just like, okay, whatever. So a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I was dating someone and then it ended. And then there was something else that was not going well in life. And I remember on this one day, I was like, oh, maybe I should just go on a diet. That was my thought. And then I stopped and said, what is it that I really, really want right now? Because I didn't want to berate myself for coming up with that thought, right? I didn't want to berate myself for or judge myself for bringing up the word diet, even though I'm someone who is non-diet. But it was that gremlin voice. Mm-hmm. And I said, there's something else that I need right now, and it is not a diet. And I just got curious about it. It made me stop, take a step back, and really get connected to what I wanted. Versus in the past, if that happened and I said, oh, I need to go on a diet, I would have started the next day. Like there wouldn't have been that space. There would have been, you need to go on a diet. And then the next step is to actually take action. Mm-hmm. So instead of that, I just got curious and got connected with what I really wanted, which wasn't to go on a diet or to be thinner. That wasn't what I wanted.
It's important to let women even into that space of asking themselves, what did I come here for? What is my purpose? What do I want to do? Is it really our deepest desire to be skinny and have that be our biggest accomplishment? I mean, it's ludicrous.
It is.
We've been led to believe that, or we've subconsciously just subscribed to this idea and got stuck in that and got sidetracked from our initial fire and our passion. And it's hard to lead ourselves back to that. But I think it's critically important because women are not living their true power out there. They're caught in this diet mentality hell instead of, bringing their beautiful, awesome, full, radiant selves to the world.
Yes, absolutely.
How do you help them?
Oh, so I wish I had 3 steps.
I'm not asking you.
I know. I wish I did have 3 steps. Mm-hmm. And I agree. We do get caught up in this, it's like a vortex, and it can seem like it's impossible to get out of. And we do spend a lot of time and emotional energy and money trying to fix ourselves and not being fully engaged in life and not engaged with not just our own lives, but the people and communities around us. And again, I think this is, in my experience, this is something that takes some time to uncover and discover. Because, asking the question, what should I be doing with my life, can be overwhelming and overpowering to somebody because they think they have to figure it out right there on the spot. And but what I have seen in my own experience and some of my clients is just incrementally becoming interested in things in life. Like, what else are you interested in? Would you like to take a class in something today or next week? So gradually, piece by piece, exploring, being curious, getting interested versus having to have it all figured out in the next 24 hours. So that feels more manageable, and you can treat it sort of like an adventure, right? Because you kind of don't know what's coming next. And the thing that comes next might be awesome and it might be not so awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some excitement and uncertainty there. And unfortunately, we like certainty a lot. And people are afraid of that uncertainty. But I like to give people assignments of explore just something, one thing new every week that you enjoy doing that's not related to food and exercise and dieting or your body. Just get curious about the world and about yourself. It can be such an awakening for people.
Curiosity comes up a lot in our discussion, I noticed. Mm-hmm. It's probably a key word because when we're curious and not judgmental, there's more room to come up with some answers and just let them be there. Because I was a master of buts. I came up with, I was so quick on my feet. Everybody said, yeah, but you could, or why don't you ease up on this, and why don't you, I'm like, yeah, I see that you can do that, but I can't because, or yeah, it would be nice, but, and that I kept myself stuck with my buts all the time.
Yes.
Don't laugh.
Yes, yo. Yeah, I totally, it's like you have this grip and you're afraid to let it go and just like see what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think curiosity is majorly important, and letting go of certainty. I am one who has liked for things to be guaranteed, and I need to know what's going to happen. I mean, a perfect example of that is when I would start, I don't do this anymore, but when I would start to read a new book, I'd read the last few pages to see what's going to happen at the end.
Oh, no.
I started to read it. Mm-hmm. So trust me, I know a little thing about wanting certainty. So I don't do that anymore. And it just has been a lot more fun to let things unfold and enjoy the ride as you go along.
And it brings vulnerability with it also. And that's a hard one to grapple with in the beginning. We as control freaks especially, we don't want to be overly vulnerable. And that's probably why we diet as well, because we figure that it probably will make us less attackable in today's society. So we feel safer in a weird way. Yep. So how did you transition yourself when you stopped buying into all of this?
You know, one of the things that has helped me tremendously is journaling. So I have never really been a big journaler. And I don't like have a book where I handwrite. I do it on an Evernote file on my computer, and that seems to work for me. And it helped me to process tremendously just thoughts that I had in my head. And it was just a way to get things out. It was a way for me to be vulnerable just with myself, right? Because sometimes we have difficulty just admitting certain things to ourselves about ourselves. And it was a way for me to just kind of get that all out and on paper. So that was one thing. Surrounding myself with people who are going through similar experience and people who could be trusted allowed me to feel more free to be vulnerable. And then, you know, through those two things, it started to just feel less scary to be vulnerable. And there are times when I'm still hesitant about it, but I see the difference it has made in my life and how important being vulnerable is.
Yeah.
So that has been my process. And I think it's still an ongoing thing. Like, I don't have it all figured out.
Yeah, sure.
But I have this practice, you know?
And you also said it was the best decisions you ever made.
Mm-hmm.
And just in order to let everyone know that it's not the case that we are supposed to find rainbows and unicorns at the end of this journey, as you say, there is probably no end to this journey or no there to reach, but just an ongoing reconnecting to ourselves and reconnecting to our own truth, I would suppose. What are you still struggling with these days?
So, well, first, I do want to say, the desire for there to be an end to this is sort of a remnant of dieting and diet culture because,
Yes.
right, it's at the end of these 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever, this is where you will be. And so we expect for there to be this end point, and it becomes disappointing when it isn't either happening fast enough or there isn't an end point. It's something that may not be able to compute immediately. Mm-hmm. The things that I still struggle with are the self-compassion piece. I've gotten so much better at it. But there are times when I have a lot of things coming at me at once where it becomes really difficult for the self-compassion. That's one thing. The second thing is, so my body is very different than when I was competing. And for the most part, I'm very comfortable, but there are some days when I'm like, oh God, those back rolls are just not sexy. I need to do something about that. So that still comes up. That still comes up for me. But again, that's the gremlin voice. And that's when my self-compassion comes in. And I have not dieted. I've not done anything to suppress my weight. My goal is to eat food that I enjoy. My goal is to exercise in a way that feels good. And if I wake up and my body feels exhausted or my legs hurt, and if I had a plan to go to the gym and I don't feel like it, my body's like, it's not going to work today, then I listen and we don't go.
That's a biggie for me. It's kind of the last frontier where all the fear is hidden. Like, but I can't step back from it because. And just as you said, it's still the gremlin that is in charge most days. And so it's interesting, how do you stop it, or how do you recognize it? Like, oh, okay, this is a gremlin and thanks for your input. I'm not going to do what you say today.
Yes, exactly.
Is that what you do? Oh.
Yeah, I recognize that it's the gremlin. So, it's funny because yesterday, where was I? I was standing at the stove cooking, and the gremlin voice, I can't even remember what it was saying, but I just remember it just yap, 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 yap about something.
Yes, that's what it is.
I just sat there and listened, and it's like, okay, that's the inner critic. It has really nothing to do with what I'm doing right now. I have control over my life, not this inner critic. So it's just amazing, the awareness that I have now of the voice, but I don't obey it like I used to.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And did you get triggering comments from the outside world? People who still kind of think, but you once looked great, or whatever they, there are people who trigger me tremendously.
Yeah. I definitely don't get the comments that I used to when I was doing fitness competitions. So last night I went out to dinner with a couple friends, and I hadn't seen them in a while. And these are friends that I've known forever. But one of them, she's like, oh my God, have you started back on birth control? And my original thought was, she's asking me that because I've gained weight. But she asked me that because she wanted to tell me my skin looked amazing. And she thought maybe it was the birth control pills that were making my skin look amazing. So I had this minute, not even a minute, but 10 seconds of, oh my God, people are... that was the triggering comment for me. And it turned out that's not even what she was thinking about.
It's probably often the case that it's not as triggering, or it only points to where the other person is coming from and what their own struggle is and what their own belief system looks like. And it usually doesn't really have anything to do with us.
Not at all. I
was so glad I could catch it yesterday. I didn't let the bad wave, crash over me, because I was in a mindfulness class, as usually on Thursdays, and there was this very nice married man sitting across from me, and he was kind of looking at my stomach, and then when I caught his eyes, he kind of patted his own stomach and then pointed at me and said,
wow.
he mouthed, when? And it's not the first time. It's not the first time. And I was like, it's my food, baby. And then in the end, it turns out when he left, he said, I didn't mean to attack you. I didn't mean to attack you at all. Because look at my stomach. It's grown so much and my belt has hurt in our sitting exercise. And I should lose some weight. And then I just said, hey, what if you're okay the way you are just right now? And next time, just, wear comfier pants. And then he showed no clear reaction to it, but he didn't go on putting himself down. And then it was so clear where his comment or his question or whatever his gestures were coming from. And I really let it drop from me like off Teflon, like, okay, no, I'm not pregnant. Or if it looks like, then okay, I'm not here to look non-pregnant.
I love that question. What if you are okay as you are? That's a great question.
And I was really feeling like a badass to actually ask a grown man, just but why, who says that shut him up, really?
I think people don't know how to respond to that because a situation like that usually goes back and forth with each person.
Yes, yeah, me too. And oh God, and
for themselves, and oh my God, I'm so bad, and I'm going to do this, and I shouldn't do that, and he probably couldn't process that in that moment. But I think that's a beautiful, beautiful question to ask. And it's not meant to, silence. It doesn't come across as something that's meant to silence people, but really to just make them think, and to think that it's possible that you could be okay as you are. Oh, I'm going to use that. I love it. Love it.
Go ahead. Because sometimes I really don't have these answers ready at all. And I just go into total hiding, hating myself mode. And I just feel my stomach in a totally overly self-aware kind of manner, which I totally hate. And then I just can't stop the gremlin from spitting his vitriol over me. But yesterday it didn't happen, and that was quite something I wanted to share. But if you compare your life from now back to your dieting days and your obsessive days, how would you describe then and now?
So one of the big differences for me is that I don't wake up in the morning upset about what I had to eat yesterday and wondering what I'm going to eat today. That's a huge thing. I think a lot of people who are trapped in diet mentality have experienced the waking up and being just miserable. Like your first moments of awakening of the day are spent lamenting or feeling guilty or stressed and worried about food and or exercise. And that's not to say that I wake up, with like sunshine and roses every day, but there are things that I am concerned about, but my body and my food and exercise aren't on that list anymore. And that's a huge, huge relief for me. That's one thing. The second thing is just the freedom I have around food. I don't feel guilty about food. I can say that I never feel guilty about food anymore. And it's because I've learned I'm way more connected to my body. So I know what makes me feel good and what doesn't. And I don't judge food as good or bad, and therefore I don't judge myself as good or bad for having or not having certain food. So just my relationship to food has transformed significantly. It's amazing.
Wonderful. So to broaden the perspective a little bit, because you and I agree that this body image stuff is a collective issue. It really is, because if half the population channels their energy into being smaller, we're not really getting anywhere. And that has a lot of negative consequences in this world, as we see in size discrimination, in bigger people being denied adequate health care, or people being bullied, and everybody being focused on weight and the allegedly direct connection from weight to health. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, because my thought is, wow, what if weight wasn't the measure of self-worth and social power out there? What if? Imagine what would be possible. And that brings up the question, how can we change this?
Yeah. So I do believe that, the diet and weight loss industry is although it is massive, it's just a small piece of, it's one of the ways that we are systematically convinced that there's something inherently wrong with us and that we have to fix it, whether it's our size, our gender, our race. It's a result of being told that you are not okay as you are. And, there's this term, I don't know if you know Sonia Renee Taylor.
Yeah, I had her on the podcast.
Yes, the body is not an apology. And she uses this term called body terrorism, which I absolutely, absolutely love. In our culture, there are certain bodies based on their size or gender.
Color,
ability, yes, that are marginalized and even abused and discriminated against. And having a bigger body, fat bodies are stigmatized in every way, shape, and form in our culture. And that's one of the things that I think is important to question and to really think about and keep your eyes open to. Fat bodies are ridiculed on TV shows, on commercials. It's just sometimes it's very subtle, and then sometimes it's very overt. So you have this, you have bigger bodies being ridiculed on TV. So there's one end of the spectrum, all the way to people with bigger bodies receiving, like you said, less adequate health care, not being listened to by physicians and other healthcare professionals. It is a big problem. And I'm happy that there's more attention being brought to it. But the reality is the masses still believe that fat is the worst thing that you can be.
So how can we speak up against that? I mean, it takes a lot of us, to make this work. And I think every voice counts. And at the same time, we want to respect our own boundaries and still maintain a certain level of self-care. But I want to make sure that people are not just subscribing to this anymore, or just keeping silent isn't an option also,
Absolutely. And so what I ask people to do is check yourself. What thoughts do you have about fat bodies or bigger bodies? What thought do you have about the human being in that body based on their size? Really start to explore that, because that's something that I think we have to do as citizens in a fat phobic culture. We have to start to really challenge those thoughts and why it's okay to marginalize and stigmatize and even abuse people, our fellow human beings, solely based on their size. And of course, we love to, like you said, equate size with health. And we know that that is all bullshit. And even still, people aren't obligated to be healthy, right? And people have the choice, the autonomy to determine what healthy means to them. So I know I went on a little bit of a tangent, but I just wanted to say, that makes me just so crazy, because I see so many people saying, well, it's not about the actual appearance. It's about health. It's about health. It's about health. And I just want to scratch my own eyeballs out when I hear that, because people are not informed at all. And yelling it's about health to someone who has been the victim of harsh words and even harsh treatment by people around them does not help the situation at all. So I think one thing is stop conflating health with weight, because it just is not helpful to anybody. And then, speaking out and speaking up in our own individual circles. So if you're sitting around the table with your friends and family and people want to make comments about how fat someone is and how unacceptable they may be as a result of that, speak out against that. We have to start changing it every little step that we can, right? If you don't have a massive platform like Virgie Tovar, you start at your dining room table. You start with the coworkers at work.
Or join my group on Facebook.
Yes.
Life Unrestricted.
Life Unrestricted, yes.
Something. It doesn't take all that much. We don't need to think that we have to change the world overnight and that it's all on our shoulder. But I think that when we unite and have our communities, even if they're just online, then that is tremendously helpful because it keeps our thoughts active and in a sane way. And we keep seeing how people really look. And it is quite easy and not asked too much and very helpful for our own psyche to just make a total detox. The only detox I would suggest ever to anyone is to have a social media detox because it's easy to do and it's really the only thing you can curate. I mean, you cannot change the media and you cannot change certain things, but this... And we are looking at it constantly. Nowadays, people are staring at their phone all the time. So it's a very easy and very important step to just radically unfollow everybody who drops this BS on their site, who belittles bigger people, who talks about weight loss or is engaged in diet talk all the time, people who constantly just, talk about their workout of the day and how much they've exercised or not, or if they have eaten in a good or bad way, if they've been good or bad, then I just took the courage and started to, if not unfriend them, then at least unfollow them. Mm-hmm. And for the others, I don't want to give them my love. So I unsubscribe radically because it's not okay. And it doesn't cost much to just... If you're following those people, unfollow them because it will only make you miserable, just as looking at beauty magazines will only make you feel less than and feeling like a failure or feeling inadequate. So why vote with your dollar? We do vote with our dollars, and it's your choice to spend it on that or not.
Yes.
There are certain small steps that we can take that are sanity promoting for ourselves and also helping a bigger cause.
Yeah, and I love that idea of a social media detox because I encourage it all the time. And here's the reality. You're not going to miss out on one thing. No. These things are telling you the same old shit that's true. It's nothing new. It just is nothing new. You will not miss out on some big breakthrough.
I can attest to the fact that I've not yet ever thought about the people I unfollowed again.
Nope.
Good.
Nope. I think it's just important to know how heavily influenced we are by our culture around this topic, right? It's a well-organized system of keeping us in place and keeping us shelling out money. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And it's so embedded in everything that we do and hear and see and talk about. And letting go of diet mentality is a radical move. It is absolutely, absolutely radical.
Mm-hmm. It is. And you're helping that cause by offering coaching also to people. What is your work looking like these days?
Yes. So I do not sell weight loss at all. I don't even hint at it being a possibility of working with me. And I call myself a non-diet, weight neutral wellness coach. And, I struggled with the term health and wellness coach because, number one, there's so many health coaches and health and wellness coaches that are doing a whole bunch of stuff. And some people haven't received any training. And I have been trained. I'm also a pharmacist, so I'm a healthcare professional too. So I struggled with the use of wellness coach, but I use it, but I use it still. But my coaching is really about helping people break free from diet mentality. I use a lot of the principles from intuitive eating, the concepts behind health at every size. And I'm a big proponent of practicing and cultivating new skills, right? Because the things that we do as participants in diet culture have just been skills that we've perfected over the decades. And so there's an unlearning process and then a relearning of new skills to replace those old skills with, and practicing in compassion. And that's my whole philosophy in a nutshell, like making it real life, real practical stuff that people can implement in their lives right away.
And you also help them by giving them information about how diet culture works and how inherently oppressive the whole idea is. Because I think that helps a lot in the evolving of the willingness to go on this journey.
Yes, you're right. I think letting people know that there is an alternative to the standard, there's an alternative to the status quo, is really important because, you know, people are always looking at our phones, like you said, and we're bombarded with information. And my goal is to, like yours, is to put out quality, sound information that actually helps people, right? That doesn't manipulate them, that doesn't try to persuade them that there's something wrong with them and they need to fix it. Like that is also my goal with my blog posts and videos and things that I put out there. Because we need to like flood the world, flood the market with this kind of stuff, with podcasts like yours, with Facebook groups like Life Unrestricted. It's important, really important.
I love what you do. Your heart sort of comes through, you know, in all your work, and your website is really beautiful also, to which I will link in the show notes. It's melissatoler.com, right?
Yes.
Yes. Very nice. So that leaves us with one final question, the one question that I ask all of my guests, and that's, what would you like to be remembered for?
So, you know what I'd like to be remembered for? I want my words to have a positive impact on people. And so, like, through my writing and speaking, no matter what I'm speaking about, like right now I'm talking about diet culture and all of like social issues regarding that. Over time, that may evolve. And I want my legacy to be that people were impacted by my message. I think that's really important to me.
I thank you for existing in this whole sphere. And I love what you do. And I want to wish you the best also for future dealings with your inner gremlin. I'll be on the journey with you. And thank you so much for taking your time.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for this awesome platform. I think this is just, what you're doing is completely of service. It's selfless. And the quality of people you bring on and the topics that you tackle are just amazing. So thank you.
Thank you for that compliment.
You're welcome.
This was today's dose of badassery from Life Unrestricted. Find the show notes with links to everything we mentioned in this episode over at lifeunrestricted.org. And if this show is making you feel good, awesome, make sure to subscribe and please let others feel good too. By leaving a 5-star review on iTunes, you'll help make this show more visible and therefore more accessible for others. You're the best. Thanks.